Welcome to the Mentor Ubuntu podcast. Our guests this episode are Lugano and Reuben, the two financial enthusiasts behind Secure the Bag 5 to 9. Secure the Bag 5 to 9 are dedicated to inspiring the young, old, and in between towards greater financial literacy, confidence, entrepreneurial action, and life affirmation. Sharing information based on their experiences, those of the rich array of guests they interview, and what is happening in business and the economy. They do deliver financial literacy workshops to organizations and groups, so connect with and contact them to learn more. And if you happen to be in Sheffield and are a Sheffield success story, get in touch and you might be graced onto their platform. Secure the Bag 5 to 9. It is a pleasure to have you here. Please tell us about your story and journey. We'll start with Reuben.
Hi guys, so Reuben here. So from Secure the Bag 529, as mentioned there. So a little bit about my story. So I'm a graduate from the University of Derby, where I did business management with sport and exercise science. So I graduated in 2016. And ever since then, I've always been an outgoing guy, done a little bit of boxing. But generally, I've always sort of been a guy that's been geared towards self-improvement. And Lugano and I, my business partner who we do the Secure the Bag with, we've always sort of, we've transitioned in terms of how our friendship has developed. So at the start, it was very much a young black man relationship, going out and enjoying life and that sort of thing. Whereas when we sort of both graduated and we both reconnected, it was more of a conversation of what can we do as men to support each other? What can we do to, improve our working environments, our home environments, and our personal development environments? And from those talks, that's where the birth of Secure the Bag came from, because we saw the benefit that it had for us having those certain conversations and being able to sit down with one another and being able to express yourself clearly and, raise your concerns and to speak to someone that's on a similar wavelength is so important. And we thought, right, okay, so, we've got knowledge from the financial world, from the IT world, and, what can we do for our community? I've raised some concerns in regards to what most people from our community, what their concerns are when it comes to their finances and that sort of thing. And we're going to raise his concerns. We put both of our knowledges together, and we was able to launch something that's been so positive in terms of the impact that it's had on so many individuals already. And then on top of that, being able to share the stories of local Sheffield people, so just local Sheffield business people, has been so inspiring, because it shows you that you just never know who's doing what, and there's a lot of people doing great work.
Myself, my name's Lugano. A bit about myself: I went to Sheffield Hallam University. I was doing international business, and after finished doing that, I started working in procurement because I really liked the supply chain sort of industry. And as Reuben rightly said, as friends, we got together and we talked and we decided to birth Secure the Bag. Now, on my side, I don't know how much more I can add based on both of you guys in depth into what Secure the Bag is. And Shemenda, I think I might need to ask you for that trademark for that intro, because it was a powerful one.
Amazing. Thank you both, Reuben and Lugano. That goes beautifully into our topic today. Today, men talk about being third culture generational kids. But first, before we get into that, I both need to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you mentally? 1 being low and 10 being extremely high. So we'll start the other way around. Lugano, go ahead.
Currently, I'll probably say I'm about a 5, 6-ish. The reason that I say that is because I feel like mental health is a journey, and I feel like you can't necessarily, well, personally for me, I don't know if I'll be able to reach the 10, but recently I feel like one of the things that helped me with my mentor is going to the gym. And recently, I must admit, that's been a bit of a miss. So that's perhaps affected me lately. So I'm trying to get back into that routine and get back into work routine as well as gym routine. So hopefully once I get that in order, it can boost it back up.
Thank you, Reuben.
Yeah, so for myself, I'd say around 6 or 7. Now, I'm normally a person who's over the years, I've developed certain ways to deal with my mental health, but that doesn't sort of stop you from going through certain situations in life that do challenge your mental health and where you are mentally. Now, for me, it's the transition of not being able to. I'm happy with my career, but it's a situation where I want to be doing secure the bag, for example, full time. Where I want to, where it's something that I'm passionate about. It's something that I can spend hours talking to people about. I'd rather put my energy into that. So I suppose the 6 or 7 is the transition between the working life and the business life.
Amazing.
And I think it would be rude not to ask also Shaimenda. What about you? Yeah.
Oh, it wouldn't be rude at all. Leave me out of it. I would say, as of today, as of this moment, I'm comfortably at a 7.5. Yeah, we'll go there.
Where's your why?
Pardon? Oh, there's a why. I forgot. All right. Yeah. I mean, I've had a pretty great week. Had a lovely weekend catching up with some friends yesterday who I haven't seen for a few weeks because I've been a bit busy. And it's a new month and I'm looking forward to what's coming up this week. So perhaps a few changes. But yeah, I'm in a good space. I've overcome a injury I've had the last couple of weeks, so I'm also able to start jogging again. That's been very, very nice. And yeah, I've been learning a new skill and it's been fun. I've had a good time. So yeah, that's my why. And how about you, Ray?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask. How kind of you, even though you're not meant to. No, I would say I've been under a 5 of late. That's because I would say you guys both said it previously, it's a transition I'm going through. So with transition, it's always painful. And one thing we never prepare ourselves mentally is transition and pain. As much as we want to get to the end goal, we never really plan or preempt what that painful, challenging situation. Because one thing I always say is small term pain for long term gain. And that's how I see the bigger picture. So at this moment in time, I would definitely say I'm a 6. But again, being open and honest, I'm also cognizant and aware that there's going to be ups and downs. And rest assured, I'm surrounded by the right people, and even more grateful and honored for you guys to basically joined us. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation. So that's definitely put me on a strong 6.
Fabulous. And of course, whatever number you, dear listener, are on, it's okay. Like, we don't always have to be on a 7, and a 3 doesn't mean that you're completely in the pits of despair. It just depends what's going on in your life. But the numbers are, like Ray said, it's just good to be honest and to be able to express what's actually going on. I think you touched on that as well, Reuben, because as you were doing your introduction, and I think this reminds us that we all have a current story and sort of a life story. And with that in mind, I'd love to hear what your mental health story is, actually. I will start with you, Reuben.
Yeah, sure. So for me, it's a personal one, really, because I moved out of my parents' house when I was 17. Now, when you're 17, you've got your big boy pants on, you think, you're ready to tackle the world, and of course, when I moved out, my parents basically said to me, look, you can move out, but you're not going to be under our support anymore. And I, being a big boy, said, yes, I'm fine with that. So I moved out, and obviously you very quickly start to find out that, the people that you surround yourself with, maybe aren't the best for where you want to be. And then the bills start coming, and you start making a few financial mistakes and that sort of thing. So I knew that I needed something for myself to kind of bring myself down to earth and to be able to focus again. So for me, these were two things that happened in my life. So it was boxing, being able to get that physical exercise in at least 5 times a week. And also through boxing, I was introduced to a great friend of mine called Victor, who introduced me to meditation. And that to me has just been a life changer in a way in which it changed the way that I see myself, it changed the way in which I see the world, and it just changed the way that I interacted with my own mental health, in a sense that, at times it allowed me to almost heal myself just through being able to sit down somewhere and really think about how it is that I'm feeling, where it is that I want to be, and what it is that I can do. So it puts things into perspective. And as you guys have already rightly mentioned, that you're going to have ups and downs in life. That's just how it is. But it's how you deal with it. It's how you ride that wave at the end of the day. So meditation and boxing for me has definitely allowed me to ride the wave, and it continues to do so to this day.
Excellent. I'm tempted to probe further, but I'll first want to hear Lugano's so that we can have a full discussion, all inclusive. So Lugano, what's your mental health story, bro?
My mental health story is perhaps when I was back in school, and perhaps getting to that age where you're getting a bit naughty. Well, for me anyway. Year 10, year 11, and you're thinking you're a grown man and that kind of stuff. And within my circle, we used to hang around as young Black men, and being vulnerable wasn't necessarily encouraged. So I always had to put a brave face and act like you were bad man, for lack of a better term. And I kind of dragged all that kind of stuff with me growing up. But then when I finished school and I realized, like, look, everyone can be vulnerable and everyone has got stuff going on. And once I realized that I don't have to carry this with me. And I also feel like culturally as well, as men, it was always, well, I'm the first boy. So as a first boy, I was always encouraged, you were the boy. Boys don't cry, boys don't do all this kind of stuff. So you're constantly carrying that kind of baggage with you, and you're constantly trying to feel like you're the macho man. But when I grew up and went to university and ended up meeting up with different people and stuff, I started to realize like there's strength in being vulnerable. And once I started peeling back some of those layers, I realized like the best way for me to help deal with my mental situation is exercise, similar to like Reuben. I like the gym. I also like reading. I also like a bit of meditating as well. And I feel like by doing that, it helps me keep balanced.
Oh, that's excellent. Thanks for sharing. I'm almost starting to feel like we've got some slightly polar opposites here. Whereas I think when I've seen your content, I know Reuben sort of spoke about opening an account when he was like 14 or something. And I see Lugano was opening a different kind of account in the school bad books when he was around that age. Well, I think it would be great to hear, because what you guys, I suppose, have done really well is handle that transition from adolescence into adulthood in a very positive manner, and come full circle to where now you want to help younger people and everyone else also. But perhaps we can unpack a bit more what that actual mental health struggle was. Like what were the things that were causing you some of these challenges? I feel like you've hinted at some of them, this cultural aspect, this inability to be vulnerable, this need to have something that gives you discipline and focus and help you channel some of those emotions. Like, could you share perhaps a few more details about some of the things that were causing you to experience some of these emotions and, what it was like on the ground, if you will.
Who's that for? Sorry.
You spoke first, so you go.
Yeah.
That'll teach you.
Yeah. So I guess for me, in regards to that, was an identity crisis, really, because as I said, through meditation, you have to, I call it, you sort of have to stand in front of yourself in the mirror, and you have to be completely honest with yourself, right? So you have to kind of peel back the layers like an onion, right? And one of the things that I discovered on this journey, sort of within, it was the idea that I had about my blackness, what I thought I represented because because I am a black man, you know.
Reuben is it frozen?
Okay, cool. I just thought this is what a cliffhanger.
We need to make sure to screenshot that as well for
later. So if you're listening, we've just lost Reuben. I think he's just going to reconnect with us in a moment. So I suppose while we wait for that and to hear about his identity crisis and what he perceived to be his identity as a black man, are you okay to jump on Lugano and share a bit more detail about what came to mind for you?
Yeah, so for myself, I think it's perhaps, I was born in Zambia and I came over to England when I was about 11. So there was that change in culture initially. And I think looking back, it did have an effect on my mental health. And it was just a case of just having to deal with going back to sort of normal, going to school and that kind of stuff. And I've kind of found myself in the trap of trying to fit in, because to start with, accent was different, the way I did things was different. So I was like, whoa, I'm a bit of an outsider. How can I become the norm that I thought? And as I was growing up, I realized I had to kind of fit in to what I thought the norm was. So that was the start of an issue of a bit of similar to Reuben, of an identity crisis of not knowing what black is. And again, the school that I went to was one of the worst in Sheffield. So I felt like as well, I was not to say I was always like one of the smart kids in school. So I was in the top sets for quite a lot of stuff. Whereas the friends I used to hang around with were in the lower sets. So what they perceived as being black didn't really fit to any criteria of what I was doing. So in a way, for me to fit in within what was being black, I kind of derailed myself to fit into that. And then that all had a mental effect because I knew I was better than that. So I think once I left school and I realized, like, look, there is different ways of being black. Black people are not just in the light of not necessarily doing well and stuff. There are people that are doing well and that kind of stuff. And as part of that journey as well, I met the likes of Reuben, because we met when we literally going to college. And when we started having these discussions and thinking, well, actually, it's all right to be a bit of a geek. It's all right to to like to read.
Amazing. I mean, you talking about your whole experience from the age of 11 and trying to immerse yourself into school, I can definitely relate with. And it's fair to say that I also embarked on the same journey as you, but at a much earlier age as well.
Okay.
What would you say was the most challenging and hard part of that? When you look back and think of that whole journey transition of you being identified as black and trying to find your own identity, going through different things, and who else was there to kind of support you? Was anyone at home to steer you in the right direction, or was it the case of that you're the oldest and you have to write the path for all the other siblings behind you?
Right. So I've got an older sister. She's a year older than me. She also kind of helped, but then she was also going for her own journey because like I said, we've come from one environment to another environment. At home, I mean, I had my mum and dad who were also being supportive, but then it's quite limited to what they can do as well because it's a new environment for them as well. At school, I mean, I had friends, but then at school as well, because I was quite smart, the responsibility was given to me in terms of helping other kids that came from an African background in terms of settling in. So I felt like everything was pretty much like fast tracked. I had to just pretty much quickly get up to speed and just get on with it. So it was quite hard in terms of having that sort of helpful circle to kind of speak to, because, and I feel like perhaps maybe one of the challenging things was communicating that, because the accent barrier is one thing. When you're trying to express yourself, people are like, oh, then they're acting like they're not really heard everything that you've said. So after a bit, I think I just got to a point where I just shut off and just kind of got on with it.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people coming from other countries tend to experience, that where you almost feel like your voice isn't being heard and people almost ignore you and you end up going into your own shell. It's tough. It sounds like a very tough thing to navigate on your own, but it sounds like you also did incredibly well to manage to get your head down. And like Ray mentioned, transitions are difficult, but it almost sounds like the transition into college worked out quite well for you because you're probably able to form different circles and not have that pressure of what I guess being a Black kid is, which is to be cool and to be a bad man, as you put it earlier. Whereas, like you say, you embrace the geek side. But lest we forget, this man left us on a very great cliffhanger.
Oh, yes.
Reuben is now back with us. Reuben, if you could please continue. You were talking about how you sort of came to your identity as a Black man and you were navigating that. We've been restlessly waiting to hear. Sorry, you're on mute. Yeah. It's still doing it. It's still teasing us with this information. It's coming. It's coming.
I'm enticing you into the information, you see. Can you guys hear me now, yeah?
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So, as I was saying, through meditation, I was able to sort of ask myself questions that I never even considered before. It's like, I was thinking, am I behaving like this because I want to, or am I behaving like this because I am a Black man, or this is how the world expects me to behave? And through that, I was able to unpack so many things about myself, and it was liberating in a sense, because I was able to act the way I wanted, not the way in which people expected me to act in certain situations. And that for me was one of the most freeing things, because, for example, when I was in school, I used to have a sort of negative subconscious thought that I was bad at school, and that was that. And I accepted that as my reality.
Thank you for listening to Mentor Ubuntu podcast and being a valued member of our community. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube, Instagram, and other social media now for access to our latest updates. DM us and let us know what your mental health is on a scale of 1 to 5. Take care.
I discovered that thought was just because of what society said. Or do you know what I mean? It was just those sort of negative thoughts that I had. But through meditation, I was able to kind of put that to one side and kind of rebuild as a man. And when I went to university, I cruised through university, and I was able to then go on to a professional career where, you know, I was able to express myself in different ways. And it's a concept which I called the black box. I believe that, you know, in this world that we live in, you know, there are certain sort of mental barriers that exist, which if we're not careful, we're going to get tripped up by them. But if we're aware to them, then we can sort of skip over them and see them for what it is, and maybe warn others from the same hurdles.
Standing. Thank you for sharing that. I'm very curious to hear about, because I'm a big advocate of meditation. I don't do it as much now, but I've gone through phases of almost doing it every day for a year and so forth. And I still do it in certain moments. It's a big part of my own mental health and well-being practice.
Yeah.
It's not always the most comfortable thing to do. And when you say that meditation helped you overcome this image that you had of yourself, I'm just curious what what that looks like, or how. I'm more curious, I guess, about the how. I'm thinking about someone who might have that negative self-image of themselves, and they've listened to the wrong story that they've said about themselves, but they want to make a change. They might have heard about meditation and not really buy into it necessarily, but because it's you, basically you with your own thoughts, and you becoming aware of what you're saying and thinking.
Of course. Yeah.
What helped you within that process? Like, was it seeing some of the thoughts when you're having this quiet time and actually just sitting with them and seeing that they don't compute, there's no evidence to back them up? Or was it a case of seeing them and actively?
Well, meditation, it allows you to sort of see your thoughts for what they are. They are thoughts, right? So these thoughts can be influenced by external or internal factors. Now, when these thoughts that are influenced by external factors, sometimes we can build up a negative self-image, which is then expressed through our thoughts, which we then identify with. But what meditation allowed me to do was to see the thoughts and actually analyze where the thought came from, whether it was a negative. For example, like when I mentioned about the studies about my sort of thoughts about not being good academically, once I sort of looked into that, it was a teacher. I remember now, there was 10 of us black boys all sat together, and there was a drama teacher. She came up to us and she started reading all these facts about how black boys statistically do worse than the Indians and the white boys. So she sort of planted that into our minds almost, because not one of us kind of questioned it. We just kind of just laughed it off. It wasn't a thing. Now, from year 7 to year 10, I just generally believed that I wasn't going to do well at school and I wasn't ever going to do well academically. Now, that's an external thought that's being implanted, and I identified with it. Now, when I took on meditation, I was able to analyze my character, where analyze my actions, what it is that I was doing, just to see that if they were really me or if they were influenced by external factors. So in a way, meditation allows you to center yourself, get to know the real you, get to know that the child, the inner child, almost the innocent side of yourself, and then express the world through that way, rather than through predetermined thoughts or behaviors, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. No, thank you very much for clarifying. And I know, Lugano, you sort of came to a similar realization, because I think one of the really powerful things you said earlier was, I knew I was better than that. And I'm assuming it might have been similar. What it was meditation for Reuben. What was it for you that helped you go through to your higher self, if you will?
I think it was just echoes of my dad speaking to me, because he's always been an advocate of planting this kind of information within me, in terms of telling me how great I am and how smart I am. So in whatever way, in the terms of me doing bad stuff, I've always had that ringing at the back of my head, thinking, well, should I really be doing this if my dad thinks this of me? And eventually that voice pretty much turned into sort of like a reality, similar to what Reuben said, where something at the back of your head is right, but because of the thought that you've got, thinking this is the picture of a black person, and those two are constantly conflicting yourself, it's one of them will eventually end up winning. But luckily enough for me, I decided to choose the path that I know was ultimately right, and being true to myself.
I know there's definitely a parallel with what you both said, and also Shaminda, you also added to that as well, is at the end of the day, our minds are like seeds. The more you water it, feed it, the better it grows. So one side of it, if you're fed negative, then your roots are going to be negative. If you're fed positivity, you're going to nourish. And in the same context, just the same way when it comes to you having control, meditating, self-worth, saying goes, you are what you think of. The same way you are the books you read, the films you watch, and also the people you spend the time with. So it's important to basically choose wisely to ensure that your mind is always being fed the right amount of things, because it's fair to say that we are all still growing, and we know what the difference is between positivity and negativity, and where and how we want to grow. And the more positive things we have around us, the more we're gonna achieve, attain, and be in a better mindset.
Reuben, do you have siblings as well? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I have a younger brother and a younger sister. In regards to that as well, I try to sort of pass on whatever it is that I have picked up in my journey, because as Ray just mentioned there, I don't believe that we should ever stop learning, because the moment that we stop learning, we stop growing. Whenever we stop growing, you might as well not be alive, to be honest, in my book. Because life is an education, isn't it, at the end of the day? So when it comes to my little brother and sister, and I'm aware that they may not always listen, because I didn't listen when I was their age. But as Lugano mentioned, sometimes it's just about planting the seeds in there, because it might not mean anything to them now, but once they go through a certain experience in the future as adults, I can guarantee you that those words that you spoke to them at 14, 15 will be there ringing, and I'm like, I know what to do now.
For sure. I think just like Lugano made very clear, his dad's words were ringing in his ear when he was facing these certain moments. And I think this is very encouraging. It's very encouraging to hear. And well, I think I've lost the quote that immediately came to mind with what you were saying, but there was a different quote that came to mind, which was an African proverb. I know Les Brown used to say it a lot, and obviously I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he had a similar journey with education, and that was the African proverb: if there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do no harm. And so that voice, that critical voice, I think you're both being able to come to a place where you could analyze what it was actually saying and go against it. I'm trying to say, I'm very glad you didn't follow the norm. I'm glad you weren't normal, okay? I'm glad you sort of found your own way and managed to achieve that. But with that said, I'd be very interested to hear what advice you would wish to give your younger self during those earlier years when you were going through these transitions or phases. Or maybe it was advice you received, but what advice would you give your younger self?
It's a really good question, actually. I'd probably say, don't be afraid to express yourself. What I mean by this, for example, I'm naturally a very curious person. I'm quite open to new experiences. And I'd say when I was younger, probably like 16, 17, there was a lot of experiences that I maybe didn't kind of go for just because of how they would look, so I wasn't being my full fluent self just because of the opinions of others. So if there's anything out there that you want to go for, if anything that you're passionate about, as long as you're obviously not wanting to be a serial killer or anything like that, but go for it, because you never know.
We laugh, but yeah, seriously, we're not encouraging that.
So don't kill anyone, but follow your dreams.
How about yourself, Lugano?
For me, I think one word that rings to mind is it's okay to be different, because I feel like when you're young, and especially from my experience, I was trying to fit into the image of what Black meant at that time. So in doing that, similar to Reuben, I denied myself of certain experiences. I denied myself of living my true self in my younger years and stuff. So sometimes I do look back, and for example, one of the things that I regret is the Duke of Edinburgh experience. Back when I was given the opportunity to apply for it, none of my friends were going. So I was like, oh, well, this is not for me. But when my other classmates went on it and they came back and told me about what it's all about, I was like, wow, that's so me. Like, I would have really enjoyed that and that kind of stuff. But because it wasn't the cool thing that I should be doing with my peers, automatically rejected and acted like I had nothing to do with it. So one word that springs to mind is definitely, it's okay to be different.
Excellent. I that advice, I think even Ray mentioned something earlier, I think is so relevant no matter how old you are or what age you are. I think all of us are fairly guilty of putting ourselves in a certain box, and it's often a transition to try something new and deal with change or not being good at it and potentially failing as well. So I think that's very, very good to hear, very encouraging. And I think one of your guests, was it John from, was it Books and Beards? Spoke about when he gone on to the Duke of Edinburgh program. And it's again, sometimes it's just awareness. People don't have the information. They don't even know it's there because again, we're talking about being third culture generation kids. If your parents are from a different culture, they probably didn't come across the Duke of Edinburgh Award. They probably didn't used to go hiking or anything. So they're not aware that it actually exists. So they can't advise you to go for it or to seek the mentorship that comes with it or some of those free training courses that come with it. So again, it's fantastic to see the guests that you're bringing on who are sharing this information, as well as even for a lot of adults who might have a social enterprise or business that they want to form. And there's a lot of sharing tips and suggestions, practical stuff on your platform of what to do. But before we get into all that, and let's go back to what we're here for. Yeah? Third generation. This is why I was asking if you've got siblings. And speaking about serial killers, I know sometimes my siblings make me want to change into that career, you know? So before we go into too much of the culture, if you're okay speaking on it, what's the relationship like with your siblings, which will link us into the cultural aspect, because they might have been born at different times and they might have been experienced things differently. They might not have had the accent issue that you faced, Lugano, and they might not have had the same journey as you took, Reuben. So I'm just curious, especially with you both, you being the firstborn, Reuben, and you being the first male, what that was like. Who do we start with? We'll start with you, Reuben, because you got younger ones, so there's not too much sauce. I'm sure I'm feeling like there's sauce with Lugano.
No, not a problem at all. So for me, it's been quite different because I was born in Angola, but came to the UK very, very young. And whereas my little brother and sister were both born here in the UK. Now, the difference in mentality is incredible because I was always raised as, obviously you're in somebody else's country, you conduct yourself a certain way and you kind of do the best that you can and then eventually go back home. Now, what I've noticed with my little brother and sister is that they don't have that mentality at all. So the way I compare it with, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Matrix. Well, I always compare it to that. So it's like, compared to people that are born in Africa and people that are born in the UK. So you could call the UK the Matrix, and there's a certain mentality that goes with being born in the UK. Sometimes you're not exposed to certain things that you would have been if you were born in Africa, for example. You might see a starving child, and you know about the hardships of life, and you don't take for granted the opportunities that a certain country can give to you. So they have sort of been the main differences in terms of mentality, but through regular conversations and through just family conversations, whenever at the table, whenever I go over to my mum's, I always make sure that I'm passing on the knowledge of and the differences and the reason why they should appreciate the position that they're in, and the reason why that they shouldn't treat people differently just because they're from a different background or just because they're from a poorer country, which happens a lot, specifically, and even within ourselves, within the Black community. There's times, where you can speak to a Jamaican or an African and you see the relationship that they have, and it can be a bit there could be a bit of a negative side there, and that's just a lack of self-knowledge. So I always try to pass on the knowledge of themselves to my little brother and sister, to the point where there was a few weeks ago where my sister had a situation where she felt that one of her teachers was treating a boy who had recently immigrated to the UK unfairly, and she actually spoke up and, you know, told the teacher. She got in trouble for it, but I spoke to my sister and I was like, you know what, well done for that, because, you know, you saw an injustice, and even though you haven't experienced what that kid experienced, but you was able to put yourself in their shoes, and you was able to see the injustice, and you was able to speak up for it. So well done for that. So there is a bit of an imbalance, but bit by bit through conversations, and that balance gap is definitely closed.
As you were saying that, I really connected with it, because I think as older siblings, you know, and it's not just older siblings, because equally I feel also younger siblings teach older siblings things too.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one quote that sprung to mind, that's I think by Benjamin Franklin, which basically says, "Tell me and I'll forget, teach me and I'll remember, involve me and I'll learn."
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody has different, you know, learning techniques. But I think especially, as you said previously, is that as much as, let's say, for instance, you talk to a child, or your younger sibling, because they're that young age, they can't really understand what you're trying to tell them and put it into context. And it's not until, as time goes on, that same thing you told them, you know, comes to fruition, and they get the light bulb moment and say, do you know what? I remember you told me this. I remember it. Now I'm involved in it, and now I can basically apply it. And that's how we basically learn. And I think it's so important for us to, you know, as Shamenda said previously, is to be cognizant that we're standing on giants, and at the same time, it's as much as we're also trying to create change and be advocates and allies and things like that. It's all part and parcel of us leaving legacies and dynasties, not specifically in financial ways, but also in planting seeds and making sure our you know, siblings, our, you know, future offsprings and their offsprings also take something not just from us, but also from our parents that brought us here, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, Ray, as you said, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and quite literally, to be honest, because some of the journeys that our parents had to go through just for us to even be here are incredible journeys. You know, we don't have to share it here, but I'm sure everyone's got a compelling story to tell in regards to that. But through that journey as well, there's never underestimate the power of what it is that they learn in that journey. And just like in this generation, like from my generation, there's certain things that I'll be able to pass on to my little brother and sister, and then there's things that they'll be able to pass on to my kids, and vice versa. That's the way I see information. I see information as something that needs to be passed down, and there needs to be a mode of sort of continuous improvement throughout the information that's passed down.
Yeah, totally agree. And as Lugano said previously, I think one thing that really puts the icing on the cake is also, as he received from his father, having that positive influence and basically saying, you know, you're this, you're that, you know, just painting a picture, because, you know, I think that plays a really pivotal part in the whole of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, that's right. Just wanted to add on to a point as well with Ray, what you were talking about, the siblings, the fact that you can learn from the younger siblings as well. I've had that sort of experience as well, because I've got an older sister who's a year older than me, but we've pretty much grown up like twins when we were brought up. So the usual thing that you could imagine as kids, obviously you'd fight and that kind of stuff. But then my little brother came along about 10 years later. So yeah, so there's that big age gap. And I remember with him growing up at that time, we were in the UK and that kind of stuff. So when he grew up in the UK, obviously he embraced the UK culture, similar to like what Reuben said. And I always remember culturally in Zambia, well, for me anyway, I was always told once a grown up is speaking, even though they're wrong or right, you just have to kind of accept it. Whereas my little brother, I always saw that shift in the fact that he wouldn't be afraid to voice his opinion, despite the grown up having that last word. Well, I know sometimes it can obviously be seen as being a bit disrespectful and that kind of stuff. But then one thing I learned with that as well is the fact that he was happy to voice his opinion and know that he's voiced it and he said what he's had to say. And if it is right, this gives you something to kind of think about after. Whereas sometimes the way I was brought up, it's a case of like, whatever the grown up has said, even if it's wrong or right, you just kind of have to shush and just crack on as if you didn't have an opinion. So that was my learning as well from my sibling.
I was hoping for more sauce and fights. But it's good. It's good to hear though, because that also, it shows a side that isn't always represented, which is how well siblings get along, especially from our communities, and support each other and learn from each other as well, which is something that's increasingly important, just like we're learning from each other now.
Yeah.
And thanks for mentioning Benjamin Franklin, Ray. The quote that I'd forgotten came back, and I think it is a Benjamin Franklin one, which is, when you're done learning, you're done. Yeah. So that touches on what you were saying about, pretty much if you finish learning, that's the end, right? May as well start digging. So now we're speaking about being third generation culture kids, which is just about, people being raised in cultures that are different to their parents. Like all of us, it seems, moved here when we were relatively young. I was probably the latest person to move to the UK because I moved here when I was 18. And what I want to ask about this to begin with initially was going to be about how your siblings might perceive culture differently to you and perhaps your parents, but we've already touched on that, which is great, and we'll dig further into it. For you yourselves, do you feel sort of rooted in your culture, or in your parents' culture, if you will, or do you feel like a loose leaf, to stretch the analogy? Hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed creating.
Don't forget to follow, like, share, and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our latest episode and listen to any you missed. And tune in next episode.
Take care.